So thanks, Steve. Thanks for coming on behalf of everybody here. I know this is your last visit to the UK as CEO of Microsoft. I think we're all aware that it might get emotional, so I've got the tissues here. If you need them, I want to make sure we're there.
We only cry over outages in this game.
Always the professional, always the professional. And so a word of advice, I've recently changed role myself. Update your LinkedIn profile. They won't find you. If you don't update your LinkedIn, they're not going to find you. I had a look last night. I couldn't. If I can't find you, the next guys can't find you. It's just... So you've been with Microsoft for 33 years, I think it is. This is you're leaving at one of the biggest organisational changes that you've put in. Devices and services is a transformation that I think we're all interested in. I'm not sure everyone quite understands it. I think devices and services is, you could say Microsoft have been doing that for a while. What's different this time, and what does it mean?
Well, let me say a couple things. In a way, I would talk about the transformation we're going to go through as, I think the expression gets used sometimes in the U.S. as déjà vu all over again. How did we grow up as a company? The truth is, you're taking the way we grew up and redoing it. We're not changing who we are. We grew up as a company that really grew up on the back of three propositions. First was Windows. And you could say Windows is a piece of software because that is what, in fact, we shipped. But Windows really defined a whole category of devices. We never made PCs, and yet, there's been billions of PCs sold that were fundamentally defined by the fact that they all ran Windows. Some of them ran Intel chips of various forms, some of them ran AMD chips, but that's number one. Number two, we grew up on the back of Microsoft Office, which was a tool that enabled individuals to do amazing things. And then lastly, we entered, starting really at the end of the 80s, but surging in the 90s and in the last decade, we said, can we take the same microprocessor chipset and make it popular in the data center and be of value, provide high productivity to enterprise customers, starting with file sharing and email, which served end users, and then management and systems assurance and the like. So what are the defining characteristics? We helped define a device class. We built a set of applications or functionality that went along with that. In some cases, we also served other device classes, as we did with the Mac, with the Macintosh Office. And then all along the way, we focused in on providing serving some of the high-value needs that developers and end users and IT departments believed in. We're still focused in on high-value scenarios. The importance of serving developers and IT people and end users for the things that they value most, the cases where you want to most be productive. We have a list of high-value scenarios. We have to redefine the way businesses use data. We have ideas on how to redefine the way businesses interact with their customers. We think we need to redefine the meeting. I think the meeting is one of the truly most time-consuming and least productive activities that most business people engage in. We think we can make meetings more productive. Note-taking, reading, information analysis, information assurance. For all the talk, and I was saying this to a group of you earlier, for all the talk of BYOD, you will not be allowed as IT professionals to not protect corporate data. It won't be okay to say, well, it was on somebody's BYOD device that we lost the secret formula to our product. That's not going to work. So information assurance remains a high-value activity for IT. That's the same. The way in which that gets manifested will change. We are building some hardware. We may have to build a lot of hardware. In the case of phones, we will not have a full presence in the phone market. We did not think without buying Nokia. We assume the regulators will approve that. That still needs to happen. But whether it's for critical mass, the ability to go toe-to-toe with Apple and Samsung, whether it's for next generation innovation, if people think phones are going to look like small slabs that we carry 10 years from now, I think that's wrong-minded. The user interface is going to evolve. One of our great misses, in fact, was not embracing touch as the user interface for mobile devices, not investing in ARM earlier. I think part of that was the fact that we were too isolated from the hardware. Doesn't mean we have to build every device, we have to build every PC, we have to build every tablet, but we do have to keep pushing the hardware-software definition, because if you're not pushing, and if you look at it, most of the big guys we compete with are doing that. Apple's doing it, Samsung's doing it. For that matter, Google's doing it with their Motorola and Nexus line of products. So in a way, I think it's probably fair to say nothing changes, but in a sense it does change. Surface is an important product for our company. The only ARM tablet that runs Windows today come from Microsoft and Nokia, which sounds like it might be Microsoft and Microsoft, assuming regulatory approval. We're going to push. We're not going to sit there and say, okay, well, it's okay for the other guys to go. We will invest in new form factors. On the flip side, I believe the cloud is the future. We're going to support private and public clouds, but over time, the public cloud becomes more and more important. Everything we do with you has to change. The way we support you, I was getting an earful of how we need to change the way we support you, how we charge for it, what the relationship is to the service. We have to change our tools, because now we're part of your 7x24 operation. And so in a sense, it's the same value proposition, and yet the way we deliver it is completely different. The fact that we participate in consumer cloud is very important to enterprise cloud. We run data centers today that have over 1 million computers in them. Our understanding of how to run a high availability, low cost service is shaped by what we're doing on the consumer side. And yet there's no reason why our business customers shouldn't assume all of the benefits of that in our other offers. That was a very long-winded answer to what was really a very simple and short question. And I apologize to Andy, and I appreciate your forbearance.
We might be here sometime. So just to pick up on a couple of things, and I'm going to try and weave in some of the questions from the audience, which were given to me 5 minutes ago, so bear with me as I do that. Picking up on the Nokia thing, so I think that's really interesting for a lot of the guys in the room here. We kind of like to understand how that's going. Obviously, we've got the regulatory stuff to get passed. What does it mean for the other phone providers? And there's a question here from Spencer Taylor of Eagle Bergman, who says, shouldn't you be looking at BlackBerry in terms of a corporate solution and doing something with them?
Yeah, I'd say a few things. Number one, the regulators operate at the regulators' pace. We'll know when we know. We've been operating in close partnership with Nokia, very close partnership with Nokia now for 2.5 years. Our engineers know how to work with it. And there is issues in being in two companies, but we basically have built, Nokia accounts for today about 85% of all the Windows phones that get sold. We have anchored around them as they have anchored around us. We think we can take the remaining friction, both from an innovation and a sales and marketing perspective, out by coming together. But we kind of already have done 85% of the integration. We did it when we did our exclusive partnership with them 2.5 years ago. There's still work to be done, there's no question, and there's people hard at work on integration plans. But we do know what we're doing from an engineering and building product perspective. We're not going to figure that out. Every new Nokia device that comes to market is built on that thesis. If you look at it today, you'd say, who are those other guys? HTC would be the primary second source of supply of Windows phones. Sony builds some, Samsung builds some. We will certainly enable and encourage other people to build Windows phones. But we're not going to stand back and hope they build Windows phones. We're going to drive forward with our own product lineup. I was talking with Vittorio Colau, who runs Vodafone, earlier today. And while I won't go through our private discussions, he had just come back from a tour in Asia, and he reported to me, yes, some of those other guys you tell us are going to build Windows phones, they sound like they really are going to build Windows phones. So I know there will be second and third sources of supply, but I think you have to say, hey, look, we look a little bit more now like Apple in the phone business than we do like Google, although that's also tricky since Samsung is so dominantly the number one Android provider, at least in developed markets like the UK and the US.
And the pace of changes just keeps moving, doesn't it? We were here a year ago and we were talking about the Surface and we were talking about Windows 8, and here today you were talking about the Surface 2 and Windows 8.1. Is that response to performance that hasn't been where it needs to be, or is that just a pace of change? And how are you going to keep up with that?
Well, look, the world has moved quickly this whole time. The question is, how do you balance? What we've really done with Windows is had major releases. We'll go through XP and Vista if somebody wants to go back. But what we've really had is major releases every few years with some minor tweaks in between. Really what competition has done on hardware is to do a major release every couple of years with a minor release in between. I wouldn't say every year is a major release for every player in the market. What we're trying to do is say with our hardware products or with our operating system, because Windows defines a set of hardware even if we don't build it, we need to do something major every couple of years, but we've got to have something important in between. With cloud services, things need to come faster than that. With enterprise cloud services, they need to come fast but disciplined. Disciplined in the sense that there's nothing we do that disrupts business flow. When we have an outage, that's a terrible thing. But when we're updating new functionality, we're going to try to do that very regularly, and yet we have to be respectful for the things that from a user training or other perspectives can be disruptive. So I just think it's the pace the market has been fast, but it's clear that in this world of cloud services, it's going to be faster. Talking about the way things are moving, cloud, we've all been talking about cloud for 5 years now. Do you think that's still something we're going to be calling out as a strategy, or do you think that just becomes part of IT now? Well, I think it is just part of IT, just not for all of us and not predominantly yet. And look, I could still go places where people will say, I'm unconvinced we're going to be able to meet our security, reliability requirements in the cloud, or I'm convinced we can do it for email or CRM, but I'm not convinced we can do it with our core banking system or our core customer service system or whatever the case may be. And I respect that, in fact, and that's why we want to help people get some of the benefits of the cloud in your own data center. That's so-called private cloud approaches. But if you really ask my 10-year view, it's just the way most of this stuff is going to work will be in the public cloud. It's not like people are going to throw out existing systems because it's too expensive. And yet, I think we will work through all the issues of security and reliability and availability to the point where at some point, people will even stop emphasizing the private cloud. I don't think that day is tomorrow. I think that is a real competitive advantage, frankly, for us. If you look at Amazon and Google, everything goes in the public cloud. If you look at VMware, Oracle, and IBM, they really don't have a public cloud. It's kind of interesting. We're really the only person who can start with you and help you bridge public and private cloud scenarios, which I think for the next 5 years is probably a real advantage. By the time you get 10 years out, I think it really is about the public cloud, but a lot of business is going to be won or lost in the next several years.
And where's that change between, so say take Office, you have traditional Office and you've got Office 365. Where's that ratio of where you're putting your investment at the moment? How's that balance changing?
A lot of things are shared. Everything comes to market first through 365. There's never a case where the on-premise product leads the cloud product. That's sort of almost a physical impossibility. But it's hard to say this resource works on the one and this works on the other. Certainly from a sales and marketing perspective, a lot of what we're doing on the leading edge is winning customers with 365, and we're doing really well competitively. Google's got a little simpler go-to-market motion for small customers, but for large customers, we're winning 80, 90% plus, probably 90% plus of the battles that we engage, and we're trying to really pick up the pace, the meeting scenario, the note-taking scenario. Let's really move those forward very, very fast as we move on-prem. On the other hand, I met with the CIO and staff of one of the world's biggest bank with significant presence, including in the UK. And they have absolutely no interest in moving right now to the public cloud. We're happy to sell them Exchange and Office. And after many years of being on the other email system that was on-prem, we'll be pleased to move them along.
Excellent.
I mean, look, you could say, do I believe in what I believe in for the future? Yes. And do I believe that's right for all of our... Look, this is part of being an enterprise supplier. The guys we compete with who were, quote, born in the cloud, none of them improve. I'm not saying they can't do some good work in the enterprise, Google and Amazon, but none of them have really proven their enterprise chops. To their credit, I'll tell you, Salesforce is focused in on the enterprise. I view them as a born from the cloud competitor. They don't have as deep and rich a product line. They have a lot of things, but at least they're focused on the enterprise. But Google and Amazon, are they really going to roll it up? Do they want it? Because I'll tell you, it took us about 15 years. We really did start on the enterprise in 1989. We really did have the door shut in our face for at least 10 years. And even 5 years ago, there were still people who were telling me SQL Server's never going to be ready for the enterprise. I don't hear that anymore. And in most surveys today, we'd be in the top couple or three vendors in terms of taking the enterprise seriously and what we can do for an enterprise customer.
So just to keep on that theme of enterprise software, Ian McFiggins of Hogan Lovells says, can you give an overview of where Dynamics fits into the future of Microsoft?
Yeah, I'm really excited about our Dynamics product line. I don't think we are going to be for everybody. If you have a really complicated business, you will probably wind up as your back-end system of record using SAP or Oracle. Because they're designed to be complicated. You could say that was praise, or you could say that was damnation. You decide which. But it's actually true. If you need to configure 30,000 tables to describe your business, we don't have that product. On the other hand, people will have line of business applications that may only require 2,000 or 3,000 tables. And configuring 20,000 tables isn't the way to get there. When Dell wants to run their supply chain runs on Dynamics. When we look at the competition we see in CRM today, we can compete with anybody because you're not trying to encapsulate all of your business complexity. In fact, if I look at a lot of the customers I see in the audience here today, let's just suppose that the CRM system in most financial institutions looks quite different in the investment banking department than it might look in the consumer banking department or the private wealth management, because the scale of customers, the business workflows work quite differently. So Dynamics is pretty important, but we're really focused in on select line of business processes and everything we can do with what I'll call tracking of customers, tracking of events, tracking of support cases, because that's really the broad mission, I would say, of CRM. It's not all about customer management. Two of the most interesting applications that are on our CRM system, one of the prison systems in the United States runs on Dynamics CRM. I'm not sure we'll call those guys customers, but nonetheless, it turns out that CRM is a good frame for which to solve prisoner tracking. Also, essentially the Farm Bureau, the part of the Department of Agriculture that pays out support payments to farmers in the United States, also runs on Dynamics CRM. The German CDU party does sort of key voter registration and canvassing using Dynamics CRM. So we see a broad set of applications and are very excited about that.
Excellent. There's a question here from Adrian Paul of the BBC, and it's with another question we had earlier on in the day. Office 365 still feels quite early days in terms of the licensing model and how it's put together. What's the future for trying to integrate that in with your Microsoft licensing? Well,
there are kind of two or three aspects to that. Is Office early? Do we have full bridges built between our Office 365 licensing and our Office licensing, and how about the support model? What I would say is, of course, it's early because it's early. I think Michelle was telling me in the last year we signed up about 1.6 million seats of Office 365 in the UK alone, mostly coming from enterprises. It's hard to say that's completely early. That's a big number for the UK, 1.6 million. So we're not brand new early, but there's still opportunity to mature. I will say that customers continue to push us to try to make it one linear process, but of course services and software aren't exactly the same. Services do have real cost of delivery for us and real human and machine savings for our customers. Software was different. There's a different support model. This is the thing that I've been talking to Michelle Vanderbilt, who runs our UK business, the most about. We do know we need to, what shall I say, really invest in our support tools for 365 to give better visibility to everything that's going on in that product to our customers as well as our own support people. It's too much black box right now for what our customers want. You could say software is not black box. You know how to report an incident. We know how to track it. You meaning customers know how to talk to us about it. So we are early days in some dimensions. There is definitely some simplification. I had a customer, and he was there, basically say to me, I feel like I pay twice for Office 365 support through Premier. Probably some work we can do there to simplify that or save money or whatever the case may be. So we definitely have some opportunities for improvement or evolution. But I don't think they're just going to be all one thing in the next year or two because they do have different dynamics. Support's different, cost models are different, and yet it's probably, we can make it easier to buy and license, et cetera, than it is today.
1.6 million, that's a considerable percentage of the UK. I mean, that's got to be 2 or 3% of the population, isn't it? Yeah,
and considering almost all that goes into businesses.
Yep.
That means people who are employed. What's the employment level in the UK? Probably 25 million people, something like that, are in the workforce in the UK, of which maybe 50, 60% are in large businesses. So maybe you're 12, 15 million, 1.6. That's pretty good. Not good enough yet, though. He's still got a big quota, and he's here to help in every way, shape, or form. We are not saturated. We would love your business.
I was really trying to help Michelle out there.
No, you did. I both advertised him and gave him a new quota, all in the same answer.
So if I wind the clock back, so the end of the 90s or the early noughties, and I walked around pretty much any enterprise in the UK, or pretty much any enterprise, it would be a world dominated by Microsoft. It would be Microsoft Desktop, it would be Microsoft Office. That would be how you did business. Today, if you do the same thing, it's a different world, right? There's different technologies in place. You'll have people with iPads, you have people with Android devices. How are you reacting to that? Is that something that you want to fight? Is it something you accept? And how do you help us manage that situation?
Yeah, we want to help you, and we want to fight it both. No, this is the only way to answer the question is with transparency. We're going to stop competing? No, we're not going to stop competing. We're going to put incredibly interesting Windows devices, phones, tablets, PCs into the market. We're going to try to do the best job. We're going to sell them aggressively. All that's going to happen. On the flip side, it would be entirely naive and silly to say there's no value for us to add, and there's no demand from you for us to also help you with the installed base you have of non-Microsoft devices. That would be crazy. Throughout my whole time at Microsoft, our enterprise customers have always talked about interoperability, openness. It comes in various forms at different times. Right now, I think what people are saying to us is, are you going to give us applications? Are you going to give us management? What are you going to give us for services for devices that don't come from Microsoft? And the answer is, we're invested. We'll make some announcements about what we're doing on some of these platforms here in the next months. At our investor conference, it was the funniest thing, I all but announced that we would do Office on the iPad, and yet nobody wrote it. I mean, Well, look at the video. It's about that clear. Now, what does that mean? We already have Link on iPad. We already have OneNote on iPad. We don't have Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, but they really do, right now, work better with a keyboard and a mouse. So we probably ought to do a version that doesn't really need a keyboard and a mouse, and it may be less featureful than the version that needs a keyboard and a mouse, where obviously we support Macs and PCs. Should we do Outlook for the iPad? Well, that's sort of you'd fight with Apple pretty hard on that because they jam their mail client, and yet from a calendar perspective, a lot of people would like what we have in Outlook on the iPad. So there'll be announcements. I think it's probably one of the more interesting things is what do we do for management on the iPad? Because Apple does a little bit of it, and they lock you out of it. They lock us and other vendors out of a lot of things. I mean, the distribution of applications to the device is highly controlled. So to put a management agent down on there that really can manage what we need to for information protection, application management, it's not the same as doing it either, frankly, on a Windows device or an Android device. We know from our history that managing somebody else's software is much harder than managing your own, and yet we have made the announcements. We're going to get into the business. We are in the business actually today, and we'll extend our portfolio of tools to help you manage applications, manage information that goes onto iOS devices and Android devices. Although what I would say in developed markets, we would see Apple as probably a higher priority in most enterprises than Android right now, but that's not a statement of policy. At the same time, we'll tell you why we think Windows devices are better solutions for you. So we will fight, and we will sort of follow the needs and desires of our customers.
Great. Right, I'm going to give you 4 words. I want you to kind of construct this into a sensible collaboration strategy. The 4 words are Skype, Yammer, SharePoint, Link.
Unified. I think it's probably fair to say that individuals all have different styles of collaboration, and any one individual may have different needs for collaboration at all times. And in some senses, the only thing we suffer is the fact that the word collaboration applies to all of them. As it relates to Skype and Link, we've done the interoperability of everything except video. We will do the interoperability of video once they're entirely interoperable. I mean, you ought to be, over time, you ought to be able to just think about it as Skype and Skype Enterprise for all intent and purposes. But until they're interoperable at the video layer, it's a little hard to say that. And whether we'll actually call it Skype and Skype Enterprise, but then you go Yammer versus Skype versus SharePoint. Geez, they get used in very different ways. I am an intense Link user, Link/Skype, intense. We run all of our management meetings. I do all of any meeting I'm involved in now. Sometimes we use video, sometimes we don't. We use shared whiteboard, we use screen sharing, we use ink and annotation. I would not use SharePoint or Yammer for those purposes. I just wouldn't. If I want to get a message out to a broad group of people in our company, I'd absolutely use Yammer. I was flying in last night and I got a message on Yammer that that Michelle was at the airport ready to pick me up. And I said, first I had to stop and read, why did I get this? Oh, I was just part of the group on Yammer that was watching the UK sub, so I was being notified about my own whereabouts. There was some funny recursion in that, but it's for really communicating broadly, it works really well. On the other hand, when you really want to have something that's long-lived and post artifacts, all of the materials for the meetings I do in Link are all in SharePoint. My favorite SharePoint is OneNote SharePoint, in fact. I keep all of our meetings, all of my notes, everything is in a shared notebook that I share with my secretary. Some things I share privately, some things I share with my staff for staff meetings, but it's all on SharePoint in OneNote format, which has been just a godsend in terms of the way we collaborate. So one person, three different styles of collaboration. And as IT providers to your organizations, probably I feel like the thing we can help you most with is to show you 2 or 3 things that people can do, let you advertise them, because otherwise you're just, quote, putting out a lot of collaboration tools, and they may sound redundant when you go to your bosses who are CEOs who don't necessarily all collaborate in this way. A lot of people don't, and yet I think you'll find in any institution of any size, people want to do the equivalent of tweet, people want to do the equivalent of archive, store and roam, and everybody meets. And so those 3 modes of collaboration need to be well supported.
And you think they'll keep their identity individually, or do you think they'll incorporate?
They're different. I mean, the truth is, even if we call them all the same name, you'd find a different name to call them.
Well, you finally got a verb. You got to Skype. People have Skype people, don't they? You've got a verb within your portfolio.
Yeah, but if I Skype Michelle, does that mean the same thing as if I tweet something about? I mean, really, they're different concepts. Broadcasting about you and talking to you one-on-one. I don't want to get our verbs confused, because all of a sudden the CEO will find out that instead of sharing with the CFO his views on the quarterly numbers, he posted them to the entire company. So I'm not trying to be a stand-up comic here, but I do think it's important. This is one of the problems in our industry. We all want fewer concepts, which I think is right, and yet we want names and handles to refer to things which are truly different. And we struggle with this even in our branding. Office is beautiful because it's one thing, and yet, of course, we do have actual specific names for PowerPoint and Excel and Word, and that is advantageous when we're talking to each other.
Great. A few kind of consumer-facing questions, if I may. There's at Virgin Active, where I work, we have 1.5 million members around the world, and increasingly we see them want to use devices and apps and different ways of tracking information about themselves. And I've spent a lot of time talking to providers, people, including Microsoft's Health Vault, people who are trying to bring this stuff together in a way that makes sense. When we get to the situation where people are carrying around a sort of personal database of information about themselves, how's that going to work when they interact with other companies and with Microsoft, do you think, in the future?
Well, I think there's two aspects of this. Right now, most users kind of understand best, and it's easiest for them to say, with this provider, I have data X. With this, if I'm following you correctly, with this provider, I have data Y. And you could say that's confusing, but it's actually not to the consumer. The consumer actually knows that kind of Amazon sold them a bunch of stuff, so they know that Amazon knows that and keeps that about them. And Facebook didn't sell them anything, but geez, Facebook seems to know everything they're doing socially. And oh, by the way, they took their pictures on their Lumia, and those are all roamed through SkyDrive. And then the user says, so that's okay. Then the next step is, how do I bring them all together? And is it one password with one identity that's most important? Hard to see Amazon really sharing passwords at the end of the day. I mean, there is some loose federation here, and some of that's going to happen. But then you really want at least one set of tools that help you search across all your personal information. If you want to share some of it with a new provider, and I do think there's invention. Commercial interests could get in the way of that, because I don't think any of Facebook's not going out of business, Microsoft's not going out of business, Amazon's not going out of business. Your purchase history with Amazon is viewed as kind of their secret sauce. Believe me, I'd love it if Google would share all of your search histories with us so that we could, well, it turns out that one of the advantages Google has in building search products is they have more traffic. The more traffic you have, the faster you learn, the faster you update. And I might even say that they should be required to do that. Or as advertisers, all your firms are advertisers. You can't even share with us today your advertising history on Google so that we can do a better job when you want to advertise on Bing. That's a contract commission, or a term that they put in place. Why do I say all this? It says commercial terms could get in the way, and yet the customer over time is going to want to get more unified views over these things. and it'll require probably some breakthroughs in technology, but also some breakthrough. Somebody's going to have to come up with a compelling reason for the end users to go to all these people and say, I want my data set free, which not quite clear how that'll happen yet. We're thinking it through on our end.
Okay. I'm going to switch to the home for a moment.
Yeah.
Like you, I've got 3 boys.
Okay.
Right, 3 boys is a challenge.
Yes.
I always say they're like Labradors. If you don't exercise them regularly, they'll wreck your front room, right? Okay. So because I've got 3 boys, we've got just about every entertainment console there is. They've got Xboxes in their bedroom, we have a PlayStation in their front room, and we have a Nintendo dust collector somewhere, which, like all of you, it just sits there and collects dust. Christmas is coming. I'm going to regret this. I've written this down. In 2 minutes, sell me an Xbox One. Right, you're not all sitting next to him. This is going to be big.
You want absolutely the best games that'll be available for Christmas. You want your kids drooling and happy and excited. There's just no question. You're going to buy an Xbox One. You won't get some of the smaller, crappier games that are available on the other guy's console. But if you really want the premier games that will ship this holiday, there's really no question. With that said, if you're really looking for what the console can do for the whole family, as opposed to just the typical male 10 to 30, turns out the demographic is not 10 to 18, it's 10 to about 30, 35. Older males, beware. If you want actually a system that's going to be great for family reunion, family connection, has great Skype integration, a beautiful camera. If you want something that is future-proofed in the sense that it really does anticipate the way things will go, how you want to interact with these systems, that really gives you kind of a device that will learn along with the family. If you want the device that's not only good at entertainment, but will also be good at education, health, and fitness, there is no question that your investment will best be served for exercising the Labradors by buying them an Xbox One Holiday 2013.
Round of applause. I knew that'd be a winner. So
it's funny how much the consumer stuff resonates with our enterprise audience.
Fantastic. I'm going to keep it going quickly. We're sort of heading to the last few minutes. Quick fire round here. So I'm going to give you two options. You tell me your preference for each of these. I'll get you in gently here. Arsenal or Man United? We're in London, so I'm going to say the first one.
Arsenal!
Yeah. Something close.
I learned it was a neighborhood at one point. That was kind of like a geographic exploration of the map of London. Arsenal!
Easy one for you. NFL or NBA?
Oh, NBA.
That's one for my kids. Google or Bing?
Bing! Yeah. Bing! Bing!
XP or Vista?
This could be the end of my life to answer. I guess I'd say XP.
IM or email?
Email.
Word or Excel?
Excel.
Cloud or desktop?
Cloud. Desktop. Both.
Tablet or phone?
Phone.
Phone. Okay. Good answers. You passed on that one.
Tablet or PC? I'd say PC actually.
Yep.
For me,
yep.
Just me personally as a user.
So look, I know a lot of people here are really interested in hearing what you're doing after you've moved on from Microsoft. Before we do that, just stepping back and looking back, if you could go back to Steve Ballmer in 2000, just as you're about to step up as CEO, and you could give him one piece of advice, what would your piece of advice be? So easy. Don't do Vista! I mean, there's actually sort of two sides to that. Of course, the product was not a big success. The bigger thing was, and it wasn't all wrong-minded, what we tried to do was a big bang innovation. That's where we started. We worked for about 3 or 4 years on a thing called Longhorn. Literally, we were rebooting every piece of Windows in the same system. It was ambitious, it was big, it was bold, but it was beyond the state of the art in terms of what was engineerable. So then we fell back, we delivered Vista, then we had to go deliver Windows 7, which addressed some of the issues
that people have found in Vista. And it's not just what happened to Windows, it's the fact that we had a high percentage of our A-team engineers working on something that didn't have max market impact. And the opportunity cost to us in phones or browsers or other areas, that's all lost productivity in addition to the saga we went through that all of you saw as customers. So there's no doubt in my mind the generalized counsel out of that would be the number one thing you really have to do is match your new innovation with your engineering systems and what is sort of possible. And it's kind of like being proud if you get 70% of the way to the moon. You either got to get there and get back or don't go. And I think what you want to do is then build the pieces that let you go there, and you might want to do that more staged. And certainly now as we take a look at it, I think the risk in the industry today is everybody tries to do just very small things and never tries to do anything big. When you have cycle times that are weeks, months for new features, it can get you out of doing what I would call bigger innovation. So finding the balance between what I'd call big cycle and short cycle innovation, I think is very important. And I'd certainly say to anybody in the industry, my successor, anybody in the room, to really have a well-developed notion of what you want your engineering cadences to be. I think the same thing applies in IT. There was a time when all IT big projects took 3-4 years. Now it's hard to sell those projects into your management. You got to sell more bite-sized chunks. But if you make them all too small, you will never do some of the big things that you need to refresh your systems. And I think thinking about cadence very deliberately and making sure that you know what you should do on cadence is essential.
And if there was a single product that you were really, if they only could do one thing in the last 13 years, what would it have been?
You mean better, differently?
No, just what if there was one product you're particularly proud of that's the one that stands out for you?
In the last 13 years, one product. I guess I'll say Office 365. I started Office 365 sort of, I started it. I mean, I don't really engineer anything. But when we said, hey, look, we've got to remake ourselves, what we really said is let's see if we can run the end user services infrastructure for Energizer, the battery guys. Mm-hmm. And all the learning and everything that came out of that, I'd probably say, and sort of in close competition, the other one I'd point to is Bing. Bing hasn't taken over the world, and yet we've come from nowhere to highly competitive, particularly in the US. We're now bringing that sort of same level of technology, et cetera, to other markets. But the notion that somebody could go from nothing to, and many years behind Google, to catching Google in a market where they have a monopoly position, I'm very proud of the team we built, the engineers we have, et cetera.
Great. So I guess, to finish off, what does the future hold for Steve Ballmer, and where do you think the interesting developments are going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, the magic for me is I don't know what they'll do next exactly, and I view the journey as sort of exciting. I'm not a guy who's going to move someplace warm and play golf every day. That's not. Occasionally, I'd like to actually really be able to play, but that's not my nature. Just for the record, I've been 4 times in the UK without telling Michelle. Each time I was here for a week. Each time I played golf, and each time I played from basically 8 in the morning. Thanks to the weather in northern England and Scotland, I've managed to play till about 10 o'clock at night. So I don't do sitting still well. That's not my nature. On the other hand, I think I'd like to be busy with 4 or 5 things. I think I'd like to have a little bit more flexibility to schedule my time. I'd like to learn about some new things. I'd like to teach to some degree. I'm sure that'll be an important part. I'd like time to also do some things that feel more like pure entertainment. We don't have a basketball team in the city where I live. That seems like a real shame to a basketball fan. That will require some work. There's some boards that sound like they have some interesting things to do. That's a potential consumer of my time. I do think that all the smart people are willing to volunteer to help focus on the overwhelming cost of healthcare in the United States. Mm-hmm. I've already volunteered a little bit of time to take a look at some of those issues. and I'll figure out which of those will really be grounding. I'm sure I will be busy. I want to get in shape. I encourage that for everybody looking at turning 60 years old.
I can offer you a very competitive health club membership, honestly.
And last but certainly not least, I'll do absolutely anything that a new CEO of Microsoft wants me to do. Lest it be lost, I actually own a reasonable percentage of the company. It's like a child to me, and I will try not to be one of those guys who lurks, but anything I can do to be helpful to Microsoft or any of its customers, I'm always available.
And how do you think Microsoft's going to react? For the first time, they've had a continuous period of pretty much people who have founded the company and been with the company for very early days. They're going to have somebody who's not one of those guys, who's not one of those household names. How are they going to react to you moving on and having someone different at the top?
Oh, I know. Our employees, at least to me, are always very nice and appreciative of me.
Sure they are.
Oh, yeah, I get how this works. You know, on the other hand, there is an advantage to organizations of a fresh approach. And my greatest, when I look back and say, we've done a lot in the 33 years I've been at Microsoft, but the thing I most want, the thing I'm most hopeful for is that Microsoft, and I believe it will, and it'll make me proudest and happiest, is how much stronger Microsoft is 5 years from now. I think I've got the ship turned. I think we need a new captain. I think a captain who will have, again, different skills than I had and Bill had. We kind of grew up together, so we started to look probably more alike. My wife says couples grow to look similar. I don't know how that happens, but people who work together a long time adopt similar approaches. And I do think that there's opportunities to take Microsoft to the next level, and I think some of those opportunities are precisely because whether our new leader comes from within Microsoft or a new leader comes from outside Microsoft, I do think a fresh approach helps, and everybody's seen it in their business life. It helps renew the people, and it helps renew the organization from time to time. And while nothing, in a sense, makes me any sadder than moving on from Microsoft, I actually do it believing wholeheartedly that it's an opportunity for Microsoft to grow stronger as a result.
Great. Our time has come to a close. It's been fascinating. Thanks very much for your time here.
And thanks to Andy. Appreciate you doing this.